with me in Washington, you would be embarrassed at the way we handle money. Let me give you our latest sort of rendition, and it's called PAYGO. Okay, have y'all heard of us talking about PAYGO in Washington? Well, again, please know, I know that people on both sides of the aisle are guilty of these kind of things, but the architects of PAYGO have set up PAYGO so that you have to pay for everything under PAYGO except for those things you want to spend money on. Okay? That's a fact. Okay? Those things that you know, sort of outside the norm that you want to spend money on under PAYGO, things like, how many physicians do we have in the room? Not many. None. People stay healthy for the next 30 minutes or so, but the fact is that many physicians are very aware of something called the doc fix under Medicare. It's a $270 billion problem that would allow them to be paid the same over the next 10 years that are being paid now. That's not covered, and so each year we deal with that in a way that's outside of PAYGO. In other words, we spend a lot of your money solving problems that are not part of PAYGO. And by the way, if the architects of PAYGO weren't creative enough, thinking of all the things that we might want to spend money on, then there was a designation that we could add called emergency spending. And you could just decide that, you know, this was emergency spending. We've done $266 billion worth of that since February. So we've got to change the way we do business in Washington. And I want to go to the next slide and say that, so what we've got to do is we've got to create some construct. I mean, literally, we don't even have a budget this year. I mean, are y'all aware that we are operating, spending trillions of dollars of your money this year, and we don't even have a budget? Can you imagine the way politicians might react to spending money that all you have to do is borrow and having no budget? Well, that's what's happening right now. And in spite of the lack of discipline, the structural issues that you saw on out into the future create huge problems. So we need to create a construct that forces us to cap spending. And I've got a 9-page bill. I realize that there's no way that in Washington you can pass a 9-page bill. But it's a 9-page bill that actually caps spending at a percentage of GDP. It takes into account some of the smoothings that you might want to have, because you saw some of the erratic nature of spending and revenues. And obviously, I want to pass the bill. I'm not under any kind of delusion that that's going to happen in the near future, but I'm going to introduce it after sort of the political season. I think most of you realize that in Washington, between now and November, only one thing is going to happen, and that is each side's going to try to make the other side look bad until Election Day to try to gain advantage. But I want this to be seriously taken up, and so I'm going to wait, do it at the right time, and try to bring on some co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. And again, I know there are going to be changes. We're going to be seeking public input, but I want to make sure we do something to address page 1. And that is, what is the appropriate level? To me, if nothing else, even if we don't pass the legislation immediately, to change the public debate, away from those things that divide us, right? Where we point at each other over tax policy or we talk about programs, and focus on what that level is, to me, is very important. And then we need to incentivize growth. If you think about it, I was on a talking head program a couple weeks ago on a Sunday morning, and the person opposed to me was Laura Tyson. She wants to be the economic advisor, I think, to President Obama. The one that's there now is leaving, and so she's been writing a lot of op-eds, and she's been appearing on programs, and she's a very smart lady. She was talking about the things that we need to invest in our country to be competitive. And again, if you decide on what percentage of our gross domestic product the federal government's actually going to take in, and you cap it at that level, and you work towards that over time, everybody has an incentive, don't they, to have the kind of tax policies in place that cause the GDP to grow as rapidly as possible. Because as the pie gets bigger, which is great for Sumner County, as the pie gets bigger, it's easier to deal with that issue. So let's go to the next slide. And I'll stop with this. This is becoming a cliche in our country, and I know that everybody who's here today, I know y'all care about the future, or you wouldn't be involved in Compass. I mean, you really want to make sure that the young people in this community have every opportunity to be educated and to be able to greet the world they're going to greet at age 18 or 21 or 24. You want them to be prepared. We are the first generation. This is, again, becoming a cliche, but it's true, that without changing the way we're acting, is literally going to leave our country worse off than the way we found it. And for what it's worth, political insiders in Washington, not those necessarily that are serving in Congress, but those who observed Washington for many, many years, they believe that there's no way that politicians in Washington are going to have the courage to deal with this issue. And they believe that we're going to have a crisis, okay? And only when we have a crisis will we deal with this issue.